Hey all, so we wanted to give you a little context as to why we are actually attending these meetings. SustainUS has been attending the spring and annual World Bank meetings now for 2 years, and the main reason we are there is because despite the fact that the World Bank is an institution with the explicit mission to end poverty, they still are financing fossil fuels. And we know that you cannot massively contribute to climate change and also end poverty. Those two things work directly against one another. So that's the main thing that we're there trying to address, but really it's indicative of what's wrong more broadly with the bank as an institution that continuously privileges private interests over the interest of those that they are supposed to be serving, over indigenous communities and marginalized people who need access to the finance. So 2 years ago, SustainUS was like, great, we are sending our people there, we are going to organize there. There are currently no young people really organizing for global climate justice at the World Bank meetings. And around the same time, a group of NGOs around the world came together to form the Big Shift Global Coalition. And that's Big Shift as big shift away from fossil fuels. The goal of this campaign and this coalition is to shift public and private finance away from dirty fossil fuel projects, away from investing in an uninhabitable future, and towards clean, distributed, and renewable energy. So those two things just kind of coincidentally happened at the same time.
Hey, so I just got to the spring meetings of the World Bank. I'm in Washington, D.C., and I just got my badge here. And what's interesting is that they actually are color-coded, so you know who you're talking to. And I'm one of the 550 accredited CSO members here. And we're primarily here for the CSO Policy Forum, which is about 40 sessions of people. Well, basically gives us a chance to talk to stakeholders and engage views. But who else is here? There's about 350 delegates from member countries of the World Bank. There's also about 800 members of the press. And then there's also, delegates and observers. So what we're primarily here for as civil society is a civil society policy forum, which is about 40 sessions and 40 events that allow us as CSO members to engage views with stakeholders. So people get really excited to meet from around the world because there's people really from around the world. I'm just lucky because I live in DC, so I got to walk over this morning. So the big event today is actually the roundtable with the executive directors. So civil society organizations get to go into a room where the board of executive directors of the World Bank are sitting, and we get to go to the microphone and ask questions on a variety of topics. And so that is kind of the most engagement you get directly with executive directors, so it's one of the most important portions of the CSO Policy Forum, and that's what's happening today. And so I'll take you inside on that. It's very hard to get a seat sometimes, so I'll get there early. But for now, I'll take you inside the actual buildings where different sessions are going on, so I can't wait to give you guys an inside look. So I'm in the IMF building right now. I'll show you guys around. It's pretty glitzy. So technically the name of this conference is the IMF World Bank Group Spring Meetings, although I'll probably keep referring to it as just the World Bank meetings because I mostly engage with the World Bank and do advocacy on that. So just to not confuse you, but there are seminars that are held here just in IMF, and there is a big difference between the IMF and the World Bank that we'll definitely have to explain in another video. But I just want to give you a tour of what's going on here and show you kind of like the anthropology or the like how people act in these spaces, because right now I'm probably the youngest person in this entire atrium, and I'm waiting to see someone who is a college student or younger who's also here as like a CSO delegate. So we'll see. Check it out. So the spring meetings are always held in Washington, D.C., but for the fall meetings, they tend to rotate around the world. Last year was Indonesia, that's where this comes from, but next year is going to be Morocco, and so they're showing it off right now. There's some cultural events, which is going to be so cool, and it makes it more accessible to CSOs that are located in that part of the world, because making a huge trip to Washington, D.C. is expensive, and that's a barrier for some CSOs who are doing amazing work. So it's great to keep rotating it. So unfortunately, I have to go back to class right now. I'm going to walk back over to my international law class and come back for the the roundtable with the executive directors, but that's kind of what it's like to be a student activist. You have to balance both, but thank God I live on a campus that is right next to the World Bank, so super happy with that. But anyways, I'm gonna go and I will talk to you guys when we're at the
Yes, we have to speak in a language that the bank or finance people understand or speak. I think that the question that I would like to pose back to the executive directors is it time that we changed that?
Yes. Okay, my name is Obioma Evelyn Agoziem from Center for Corrections and Human Development. My question is simple. From the analogy given by Amanda about the woman, my question is, how will the people at the grassroots who are the receiving end of the climate impact have direct access, to World Bank investment in climate finance and support? Because I happen to come from a place that erosion has completely cleared a village as we talk. So how are they going to assess this funding directly to cushion the effects on the local people? Thank you.
You know, the bank is primarily working with governments, and also the bank is a big institution, so has quite a lot of funds, and has some difficulty to go into very small micro projects.
It's very hopeful to see the bank announcing a commitment to invest in strategies to help countries combat climate change. But given the bank's new president was appointed by a climate denier, what can we expect in the near future?
Thank you. Can you just say your name?
Climate issues.
Yeah, I can start out because I'm sure some of my colleagues want to say something as well. So where's the bank going on climate? I think it's very clear that we have hardwired a lot of policy commitments over the past years. You know the One Planet Summit commitments, you know the new commitments that was made at COP24. We have the climate commitments that are part of the capital packages, which will be implemented over the next 10 years. So there is a lot of things going on internally in the bank. And then you can also say that the world is moving outside. I spoke with bankers yesterday who were really saying, I mean, we're not going to finance climate things that are not climate proof or climate safe any longer. Because if we finance fossil fuel projects, there may be stranded assets in 5 years' time. So the whole world is moving in that direction. So I don't see that the bank will be left behind in that. So I'm actually quite optimistic about where we're going on climate change.
Are we hearing that actually the executive directors are saying they're giving a reassurance that in spite of change in leadership or in spite of perceptions, I'm trying to really be very tactful with my comment, that we are not going to see the World Bank rolling back on commitments that were made in the Paris Agreement, and that actually there's going to be even more investment and prioritizing of commitments that need to be met because of a growing ambition that's required to address the challenges that we're currently facing. So I'm hearing reassurance from yourselves. Is that
Absolutely. It's a one-way street, So we're not gonna go back, on the climate. We have a commitment.
My name is Augustine. I'm from the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. We'd like to know, how can the World Bank invest in upgrade people-centered renewable energy to facilitate access for the local populations and the masses that are yet to have access to energy?
That renewable technology is very, very good in going into remote areas and at a small scale, off-grid. And in particular, if renewable technology is combined with battery storage, this is ideal to go into these areas. So we encourage the bank to further explore those possibilities.
My question is directed to the USAID. Last month, 104 million young people in 120 countries participated in a climate strike. Climate change is the most pressing issue of our generation. Will you support my generation and heed for the climate change is the most pressing issue of our generation. Will you support my generation and heed for the call to end fossil fuel financing by 2030? This question is from Julia Griffiths from SustainUS. Really, I think the conversation around climate change has thrown apart everything else that we knew in terms of development approaches and economic approaches. And so is it time really that the bank started thinking differently about its definitions, not just of poverty, but on the productivity, what is this unit? And what does a human-centric definition that doesn't start with finance look like in these questions? I think these are some of the. I think the bank is well placed and positioned to actually come up with alternative models of economic growth that are not necessarily driven by an unquenchable thirst.
Amanda, that's exactly. It's a very good question you are asking. This is what the colleagues are discussing with the management at the board, and in our dialogue. We need a new thinking when it comes to the new growth model. First of all, the growth should be inclusive. Second, we are, the OECD countries are talking about, technology and the future of the jobs. We need to be.
There was a very specific issue that was flagged up in the civil society discussion that I think it's really important and imperative for the directors, the executive directors, to hear of the leadership of the bank is a recruitment process that has left a lot of us disappointed. It is a missed opportunity for the bank to have actually tried to implement a more inclusive, merit-based, diversified appointment process that really brings on board people with different skills from different parts of the world. What has happened is yet again, we see a recruitment and appointment in the bank that comes from one single nation. And that cannot surely suggest that people who are qualified to lead the bank can only come from one country. Now, we understand the geopolitical issues and challenges not agree that because of the fact that people don't, either countries don't submit candidates, that means that we cannot have a model that is different. I think that when we are trying to bring women, for example, on board in terms of gender equality, what we do is, if you don't get the women the first time round, you go back and you look and you make sure that you go out and create mechanisms that are going to bring them on board. We don't say, sorry, they didn't apply, because that's what we used to say 20, 30, 40 years ago. We are now in a position where we cannot afford to say, so please hear this from a voice of what I call a voice of love and reason, that actually people are no longer prepared to continue with the same processes that continue to show the power dynamics between the global north and the global south. And so it's really important that if we are going to change the very system that is hardwired to serve the power structures that we need to challenge it and we need to do something different, because people out there expect the leadership from all of us. So I hope that my colleagues from civil society feel confident that I have ably positioned the concerns that they had. Personally, I am somebody who is very passionate, so I would have liked to see more passion, both from the executive directors as well as from other colleagues, because I think that this conversation, not just to be politically correct, but to really come to it with a deep, concern that requires, because people are dying on a daily basis.
Hey everyone, I'm with Executive Director Susan, representing the Nordic countries, and she has a message for young people.
Hi, I'm Susan. I really want you to engage with the World Bank Group. That's the biggest finance of climate action. I want you to come to the meetings, but I also want you to go to the country offices of the World Bank to tell them what you think and how you want them to engage even better and more on climate change.